There we go. All right, so at the end, he's going to have lunch with Jordan. And I suppose that he has done what now would be called ghosting someone, right? Like he's just stopped calling her. And he's got to have some kind of closure, so they're going to have lunch. And she tells him, nevertheless, you did throw me over. What is she admitting to him?
She liked him.
Yeah, she liked him. And he hurt her. Okay? You threw me over on the telephone, which I guess is kind of like if you break up with someone over Snapchat or, you know, text, yeah. She says, I don't give, she does like try to save her pride, as we all tend to do, right? She says, I don't give a damn about you now, but it was a new experience for me, and I felt a little dizzy for a while. We shook hands. Oh, and do you remember, she added, a conversation we once had about driving a car? Why, not exactly. You said a bad driver was only safe until she met another bad driver. Well, I met another bad driver, didn't I? I mean, it was careless of me to make such a wrong guess. I thought you were rather an honest, straightforward person. I thought it was your secret pride. So she kind of, you know, she doesn't let him off easy. There had been a conversation, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but when they were driving one day, she was actually driving, and Nick was in the car with her, and she was a reckless driver, right? And he calls her out on it. He's like, you are a rotten driver. And she said, well, you know, I depend on everybody else to pay attention to what they're doing. And they both agreed that she would be okay unless she ran into another rotten driver. Well, here she's telling Nick, you were a rotten driver. Not meaning that he ran her off the road, but that he hurt her. You know, and it was unexpected. She didn't think that he was the type that would just, you know, end it so suddenly and without explanation. And he feels tremendously sorry. And actually, he says, angry and half in love with her and tremendously sorry, I turned away, right? I mean, Nick's a good guy, okay? He feels bad for the way things went with her, but she was a part of that whole life that he was like, I gotta cut this loose. In fact, he's gonna go back west. Okay, he gives up New York, gives up all those folks. Gatsby's the only one that he actually holds good feelings towards, and of course Gatsby is gone, okay? So I'm gonna keep reading, it's in the same spot. One afternoon late in October, I saw Tom Buchanan. He was walking ahead of me along Fifth Avenue in his alert, aggressive way, his hands out a little from his body as if to fight off interference. His head moving sharply here and there, adapting itself to his restless eyes. And just as I slowed up to avoid overtaking him, he stopped and began frowning into the windows of a jewelry store. And suddenly he saw me and walked back holding out his hand, like he wants to shake Nick's hand, right? Nick hesitates. What's the matter, Nick? Do you object to shaking hands with me? And Nick says, yes, you know what I think of you. You're crazy, Nick, he said quickly. Crazy as hell. I don't know what's the matter with you. Tom, I inquired, what did you say to Wilson that afternoon? Up to this point, we don't know how Wilson finds out that Gatsby owns that big yellow car that ran over Myrtle. But now we're going to find out the truth, okay? He stared at me without a word, and I knew I had guessed right about those missing hours. I started to turn away, but he took a step after me and grabbed my arm. I told him the truth, he said. He came to the door while we were getting ready to leave, and when I sent down word that we weren't in, he tried to force his way upstairs. He was crazy enough to kill me if I hadn't told him who owned that car. His hand was on a revolver in his pocket every minute he was in the house. And what if I did tell him? That fella had it coming to him. He threw dust into your eyes just like he did in Daisy's, but he was a tough one. That means he had you fooled, okay? He ran over Myrtle like you'd run over a dog, never even stopped the car. Oh, so all this time, what's he been thinking? That Gatsby killed Myrtle. That means, what about Daisy? She never owned up to it. You want to talk about selfish, self-preserving, right? Never owned up to it. And that's what, Nick says here. There was nothing I could say except the one unutterable fact that it wasn't true. Like, he thinks about letting the cat out of the bag. He thinks about telling him the truth. But he realizes, it wouldn't even make a dent in the arrogance of Tom, right? And Daisy, for that matter. And he goes on and he'll say this. I'm skipping a paragraph. Nick says to us, I couldn't forgive him or like him, but I saw that what he had done to him was entirely justified. It was all very careless and confused. They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they'd made.
I have a lot of shirts, Miss Parker.
Okay?
Sorry. This is for Charlie Martin, the goat.
Okay.
Charles.
I forgot to grab this, didn't I?
I don't know, I don't care. It's fine. Where's Bailey Gosling?
Bailey's in the back, and then you have one more. Who's that one for?
Andrew Stewart next hour.
Okay. All right, so who had to clean up the mess? He did. Right? Lives are destroyed. I mean, who died? We got 3 people dead.
Myrtle died.
We got Myrtle,
Gatsby.
Gatsby, and Wilson. Okay, and Daisy and Tom, man, they just fled. They just leave. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about like the careless rich, right? Okay, now, very, very end of the book, last 2 paragraphs. Okay, actually last 3 paragraphs. So Nick goes back to Gatsby's house. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. So it kind of comes back around to that light. And the light, which is, his envy for her or her life. Green means go for it, go ahead, move forward. I mean, it's all there, right? There's so much symbolism. Okay? So he says, he had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. But he did not know it was already behind him in the past, y'all. Somewhere back in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So I love these last lines, and I love that every year when I read them, I have to really kind of think about them, like, what is he saying here? And the only thing that I could kind of come up with here is that, Gatsby was someone who was that romantic, who was fixated on the past and trying to recreate it. And that is just something, as Nick said, really can't be done. So I think he's indicating that Gatsby might have been defeated before he even kind of got started. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So definitely a tragic figure, this Gatsby. Okay. All right. Now, moving on from one tragic figure to another. Thursday, you got a poem called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by a guy named T.S. Eliot. And it's all kind of connected because if you'll recall, T.S. Eliot is the inspiration for what figure in Gatsby? Yeah, the eyes. T.J. Eckelberg, the eyes that are looking over the wasteland, right? The wasteland that's known as the Valley of Ashes. Okay, so I have a discrepancy here, and I'm thinking that this poem was actually written in 1910. So scratch out 1915 at the right next to the title. And put in 1910 because it was written when he was in grad school. It was written when he was actually really young, like 22. And y'all have read this poem before. It does not read like a poem that was written by a 22-year-old. It reads like a poem to me that's written by someone at least my age, right? At least middle-aged. But he was almost a kid when he wrote this thing, okay? So we're going to read through it, and it is long, so I want you to make some notes as we go, and we'll talk about it. And then when we finish, we will be done for the day. So we finish with time to spare. We will relax for a minute or two, okay? So here's the thing. Thoroughly modern, this poem. Fragmented. Might want to jot that down if you haven't already. It is fragmented. And by that, I mean it appears like broken. It gives us these little scenes that aren't all together. I mean, it like shifts from scene to scene and back again. It's fragmented. It's like little episodes, okay? And the first scene is a street scene, okay? So it opens with really famous lines, an unexpected simile. I think I may have a copy that you can borrow, Catherine, on the refrigerator, okay? But don't write on it because I know you have one somewhere. All right? Okay, so it opens up as an invitation. Jot that down. He's inviting us into his world. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. All right, this is really weird because he's talking about the evening sky. And typically the evening sky is full of color, right? Because you got the sun setting. Not this sky. Look out the window. This sky he's referring to looks more like what we see right now. It is gray. Because it's being described as a patient etherized on a table. A patient etherized on a table is awaiting what? Surgery. So you can imagine like the colors would be very like muted, white, gray, okay? Let us go then through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats, highlight this line of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, highlight this too, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. Okay, now, what does insidious mean? Y'all have seen those horror films, right? So you know it can't be good. Insidious is like evil. So part of his life involves these street scenes that are sketchy. One night cheap hotels. And when I think about one night cheap hotels, honestly, I think of like prostitution. Okay? One night stands. Okay? Cheap restaurants, right? So this is like those, you know, back alley streets that are kind of sketch. Leads you to an overwhelming question. Do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. So this is a scene that's a little, you know, dicey. Okay? All right, moving on. Second scene. And it's presented as a refrain. And y'all, you might want to jot this down. A refrain is a line or lines in a poem that, you know, repeat, basically. In the room, the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. So Michelangelo is an artist. So now we go from like the street scene to some kind of maybe party or gallery or museum scene where you have these women that are talking about what?
Paintings.
Yeah, paintings and art, okay? So you've read this, so I don't think I'm telling you anything new, but these women are probably the women that he would like to be able to get to know, to talk to. Maybe he feels that they're a little out of his league. Maybe they're a lot out of his league, okay? And now we're back to the street scene. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. The yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. So the yellow fog that creeps into this street scene and like moves up towards the windows is described as an animal. But which animal is it? It is a cat. It is a cat. The muzzle makes you think of dogs, but we don't really call the mouth of a cat a muzzle often, but I suppose that it is referred to as that, at least in some cases. But like, you know how cats rub on your legs and stuff like that? So cats, and T.S. Eliot was a cat person. He actually wrote the short story that was a children's book on cats that became the musical. Have y'all heard of the musical Cats? It was made into a movie that really wasn't very good from what I hear.
Oh, man.
Okay? Yeah, so he's like a cat person. You know, cat people are a little weird, not gonna lie. If you are one, just own it though. It's okay. All right, so yeah, the yellow fog's like a cat in that extended metaphor. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. Highlight this. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. A time to murder and create. Not literally murder, okay? So this reminds me of a scene from Their Eyes Were Watching God. Do you recall when Janie's husband Joe dies?
Mm-hmm.
What does she have to do before she walks out and tells the town people?
Make her sad.
Yeah, she's got to like change her face. Okay? She's got to change her face so that she appears as they expect her to. That's like putting on a mask, guys, okay? So when he says there will be time to make the face, to meet the faces that you meet, maybe mark this out to the side. That's exactly what he's talking about. He's like, there's plenty of time for me to figure out who I want to be and how I want to present myself. To murder and create what?
The person you want to
Himself. That's right. That's right. It's an idea we've talked about quite a bit. Here's the problem though. Is he right? Do we have all the time in the world?
No.
We do not. We don't know how much time we have. I went to a funeral Thursday of a friend of my son's who, he overdosed, to be honest with you. Bad choices on his part. But we don't know. A reminder that we just don't know, right? So, he's wrong, J. Alfred Prufrock. He thinks he's got all the time in the world figured out, but he does not, okay? There will be time to murder and create, time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on her plate. Time for you, time for me, time yet for 100 indecisions, 100 visions and revisions, again of himself, who he wants to be, for the taking of toast and tea. And y'all, he lived in Britain for a long time, and in Britain you take tea at 4 p.m. So he says, even before 4 p.m. we got all this time, when we don't. We get that. And we have the women again. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? Do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. So, make a little note to the side. Now, we have him wanting to go into a gathering, perhaps a party, perhaps where these women are, that he would like to talk to. But think about what is pulling him back. Why does he hesitate to do something that to so many of us is just kind of, a regular, average thing, like to just go into a room full of people? Here's what he says. Do I dare take the time to turn back and descend the stair, come down the stairs into this gathering, right? With a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar, mounted firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. So he's dressed up, he's dressed for this gathering. But they will say how his arms and legs are thin. What is he so hung up on?
His appearance.
Yeah, he's worried about what people are gonna think about him. Okay? So much so that just stepping into like a scene, a room full of people, to him is like disturbing the universe. Do I dare disturb the universe? So, do you remember way back when we read The Glass Menagerie?
Yeah.
And Laura, who was so horribly shy, said that when she walked into the auditorium for choir, all she heard was the clumping of her brace. And Jim, who had, the same class with her, says, I didn't hear anything. Like Laura, he has magnified just going up and talking to someone into disturbing the universe, which is kind of sad, isn't it? In a minute, there's time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. And again, put a note, he's wrong. We don't have time. For I've known them all already, known them all. Highlight these lines. I've known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. Highlight this. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. This is huge. Probably the most famous line in the poem, okay? So, a coffee spoon is tiny. If he's looking over the course of his life and what he's done and experienced and accomplished, and he's measuring out his memories like coffee spoons, what does it say about what he's been able to do? He hadn't done anything. Because something big would be like, a scoop, right? And he hadn't done anything. And he admits that. So if nothing else, he's at least self-aware. There you go. Okay? I've measured my life in coffee spoons. I know the voice is dying with the dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. How should I presume? How do I begin? He cannot. That's his problem. He can't seem to begin. Okay? I've known the eyes already. Known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, you might want to mark these too, sprawling on a pen when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, how do I begin? All right, so this is something that you may not get because you may not have seen this before, but if you've ever been to a museum where they have butterflies or insects on display, especially an older museum, the practice in the old days was to take, say, butterflies, and they would preserve the body, but then use a long straight pin, and they would stick the pin through, I think it's the thorax, so that the butterfly in rows, butterflies would be stuck onto a display board and then probably encased in glass. Okay, I don't know if that's still how they do it today, but when he says, I've known the eyes that have fixed me, in other words, they have made me feel trapped so that I am like pinned and wriggling on a wall like a bug. I've known those. What that emphasizes is that every time he actually has a conversation with someone, he feels like he is being studied. He's that shy. And there's no one in this class that is that shy. So it's hard for us to grasp. I guess folks that may have severe like social anxiety, you know, he feels like every time he speaks with someone, he's like trapped in being judged and studied, right? Now, how should I begin? I'm skipping down a little bit. I've known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted, white, and bare. Who wears bracelets mostly? Women, yeah. So he's like, I've like talked to a few women, okay? And you get the impression he wants to approach a woman, maybe one of these women that's talking of high art, okay? But look at what he says in parentheses, y'all. Like the arms appear fair, light, braceleted, but when he looks closely, what does he see?
Light brown hair.
Yeah, the hair on the arms, which we get the impression is a little off-putting for him. So might want to jot this down, guys. I think he's somebody who likes the idea of women, maybe more than the reality of women. He's definitely nervous around them. Okay? Skipping a little bit, under 9. And at number 9, and I know y'all answered these the other day, what does the speaker seem to fear? I'm thinking he fears women. Okay? And what they'll think of him. Now, he's considering, what would I say if I could talk to someone? And this is a consideration. He says, shall I say that I've gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? That would be his truth, because guess what? If he does not actually figure out a way to act and talk and live, he's going to be a lonely old man who smokes his pipe and looks out of the window and watches the world pass him by. That's his truth, okay? And here he confesses something, and you want to put a big star next to this too, another very famous line. He is in such a bad way, you guys, that he envies something. He says, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. He's so incredibly insecure and shy that at times he envies what? A crab, because all a crab has to do is like scuttle across the floor of a silent sea. By the way, do y'all know anybody that actually enjoyed that COVID shut down a lot of social activities?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that depends.
Okay.
At first it was nice, but now it's just annoying.
Yeah, now it's time. It's time to move on, right? So, hey. So, yeah, you know, there are some folks, I read an article the other day that talked about how people that have social anxiety or that just, you know, they're introverts. They're like having to now adjust to actually getting back out and talking to people.
Okay. Can I like speak on
Yeah.
behalf of my people? Okay.
I'm gonna have my
So-
people.
I didn't realize how bad my social anxiety was until it shut down and I had to start going out and doing things, and COVID made it worse, so I really hate COVID now, but at the time I was like, this is fabulous.
I mean, sometimes, I'll be honest, I talk all day and I try to be sweet and kind and charming, and then I don't want to talk to anybody after I leave school. I'm just like, nothing. I'm not a phone talker. My husband works out of town half the time, and like our conversations go like this. How was your day? It was good. Love you. Bye. I mean, I'm like, no, I'm done. It's kind of sad. All right. Okay, back to the poem. So, in the afternoon, the evening, I'm on the back now of that sheet. In the afternoon, the evening, sleep so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, just kind of hangs on, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, that would be like ice cream, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? Now that line 80, might want to make a note. That's him saying, can I just talk to someone, right? Can I just force myself to do something? Then we have this biblical allusion. Think about who he's talking about in the Bible, okay? Though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here is no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker. I've seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. Who do you think the eternal footman would be, especially if footman is capitalized? Probably God. It might be death, but I think it might be God too. And in short, I was afraid. So he knows that, I mean, he should understand that his time is limited, right? Okay, so let me ask you this. In the Bible, there is a person who was a prophet, and New Testament, by the way, and he was visiting I think it was Herod. He was visiting a very powerful king whose favorite daughter danced for the court.
Was it John the Baptist?
Yes, it was. And her name, I want to say, was Salome. Is that right?
Maybe.
I think it was Salome. And after this amazing dance, her father is so impressed by it that he looks at her and he says, I'll give you whatever your heart desires. And she looks at John the Baptist and she says, I want his head.
Oh.
And so they lop off John the Baptist's head and they present it to her on a platter.
I love that.
Okay.
I'm like, why does she want his head?
I don't
Because
know.
I think her mother had issues with
I should go back and reread that biblical
Her
story.
mother was like, you need to go ask. And she was like, okay.
Yeah,
Mom.
Oh, so it's the mom.
It was really her mom.
You know, it's always the mom. It is. Y'all, when you read Hamlet next year, it's always the mom. So, and Macbeth, when you read Macbeth, it's always the
Well, he
mom.
had to do something.
Anyway, yeah. So he says, you know, he realizes I'm no prophet, even though he feels, you know, decapitated, right? Like women are kind of threatening to this guy, okay? Now, and the next one, and would it have been worthwhile? Now, everything up to this point, y'all, might want to make a note of this. Everything up to this point has been present tense. Would it be worthwhile? Could I just force the moment to its crisis? Here, we have a shift to past tense. So, he did not act. He did not do what he was trying to get himself worked up to do. Even if it's just talking to a woman, he just did not do it. Would it have been worth it? After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, the porcelain, talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball and roll it towards some overwhelming question, highlight this, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. Why the comparison, which is another biblical allusion? Why the comparison to Lazarus? Had he been able to act, he says, would it have been worthwhile to be able to say, I am Lazarus? What possibly could have happened? Could have come back from the dead in what way, though?
He's a new man.
Yeah. If he could just... Don't you remember Lazarus was brought back from the dead?
Yeah, I knew that.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't remember the actual whole thing.
Well, Alfred Prufrock, I mean, he's not dead, but in a way he kind of is because he doesn't live, right? So if he could, persuade himself to live, even if it just means stepping in the right direction, right? Just getting a start. He could be a new person. Okay? But the moment has passed, y'all. The moment has passed. Down at line 99, would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets, the dooryards, the sprinkled streets, the novels, the tea cakes, the skirts, all these things, right? That trail along the floor, this and so much more, it is impossible to say just what I mean. So he fears being misunderstood too. He says it is impossible to say just what I mean. As if a magic lantern through the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. All right, now we have this allusion to Shakespeare, Hamlet. Okay, y'all have not read Hamlet yet. You will next year, but Hamlet's famous soliloquy, as you know, because we've talked about it, starts off to be or not to be. And Hamlet, in the play, has a decision to make, and all throughout the play, he can't decide what to do. So he too is indecisive. Okay? And in that soliloquy, to be or not to be, he's like contemplating just ending his life. Should I live or should I end it all right now? And he goes on to say, problem with ending it right now is because I'm not really sure what happens after this life. Okay, so our speaker admits, I'm not Prince Hamlet. I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an intended lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, differential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, meticulous, full of high sentence, a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. Look at the digression. Circle prince. He says, I'm not the prince. And then he goes through all these stages, right? He says, maybe I'm an intendant lord. Maybe I am someone who could give advice. Maybe I am just what? The fool. So again, Sanaya said, I mean, he's self-aware. Okay? I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. I think that means he realizes that he's going to grow into an old man without doing much, and he's going to be too cautious in life, okay? And now the big decisions are things like this. Shall I part my hair from behind? Because remember, he's balding, okay? Contemplating the comb over. Do I dare to eat a peach? Because peaches are messy, right? You might actually get some of that nectar or whatever on you, right? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. Wow. So it's almost like he's given up, right? By the way, mermaids, women, beautiful, but connected to the sirens. And the sirens are monsters. In other words, they're dangerous. What do the sirens try to do?
These things are
They lure the sailors to their death. So he is too insecure, frightened. He's definitely intimidated by women. He's too cautious to truly live. And y'all, it's so sad, right? I've seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We've lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. So it's very, I would say tragic, except I have to say that Prufrock seems to do much of this to himself, you know? But in terms of modern poetry, it's fragmented, which means we got these different scenes that kind of pop up. It's left kind of like a question, right? And it seems to also, you might want to jot this down before you put your stuff up. It seems to reflect the questions and the insecurities of the people of that lost generation. I mean, one of the reasons they're called lost is because they seem to be wandering around without answers too. You know? Does that make sense? Yes, yes? All right, I am done. Woohoo, and we got time to spare.